I'm starting a recording of this Sutta study. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham Dhammang Sangham Namasami. We will be looking at a sutta called the Ahara Sutta, which is called Nourishing. It comes up in connection to the retreat that we're giving this coming weekend on the 4 nutriments of life. But this sutta is treating a nutriment or nourishing in a different way altogether. This sutta is not looking at the factors that cause the continuity of existence within a life and over multiple lifetimes, but instead it's looking at you could say, an aspect of causation, the kind of factors that will support the growth of the 5 hindrances, or the kind of factors that will denourish the 5 hindrances, causing them to become weaker and eventually to go. And likewise, those factors which would nourish the 7 factors of awakening, and those factors which would denourish or weaken the 7 factors of awakening. So basically, here are the idea of nutriment is simply a kind of you could say, even a metaphor. I found this most useful when I was a beginner in Buddhism. I was so aware that I had so many hindrances and I wanted them to go away, but I didn't know how to make them go away. It was quite discouraging. And sometimes I would read in the suttas that, a person squares away their initial right view and right thought and develops their sila, practices loving kindness, and then they abandon the hindrances and go into jhana. And just at that point, I would almost, want to cry, because I wanted to do that, but I didn't know how. And I would say, wait a minute, you have to explain how. And so this sutta was so precious to me at that time, because it gave us some ideas about how to weaken the factors that are negative to us. And even the same way, sometimes, like even in developing wholesome factors, whether it be the factors of awakening or something else, like even practicing loving kindness, developing the thought of kindness towards oneself and for all beings. Some beginning students, they would like to have loving kindness for themselves, but they don't know how. So if you don't feel like you got the power, or you haven't had the breakthrough of understanding that this is possible for me, that I can do this for myself, then the idea of nutriment means there's underlying supports. And if you can't control the thing that you're aiming for, you could control the supports, the underlying factors. So with that introduction, I'll open up this sutta. This is in the Connected Discourses, number 46.51, called Nourishing in English, according to Bhante Sujata's translation, or Ahara Sutta. I think today, this sutta is actually got a lot in it. I'm first going to go over the parts that are dealing with the 5 hindrances, and if we use up all our time on the 5 hindrances, then next week we will continue with this same sutta, looking at the parts that are dealing with the 7 factors of awakening. Can you find the page for that in the book? You give me one of the books and I'll find a page. In the book, it's chapter 46. On page 1597 in the printed Wisdom Publications edition. The Buddha said, "Mendicants, I will teach you what fuels and what starves the 5 hindrances and the 7 awakening factors. Listen. What fuels the arising of sensual desire, or when it has arisen, makes it increase and grow. There is the feature of beauty. Frequent, irrational application of mind to that fuels the arising of sensual desire, or when it has arisen, makes it increase and grow." So the Subha Nimitta is called the sign of beauty. So the Subha, this is whatever is dear and delightful, what's attractive to us, what's pleasing to us, what's pleasing to the senses, and then when we say the sign, the nimitta, this will be like one part or one aspect of any object that comes to represent the whole. So, for example, if you look at, here I've got an example. Here we have a rose, right? And the pink color could be the nimitta, the sign of the rose, or the sweet aroma could be the sign. And if the mind just is attracted to that one aspect and really becomes absorbed into that one aspect, then that's the only part you notice. And you don't notice the thorns, because just the smell or the color is the nimitta of the beauty. Or you don't notice that this rose will fade away and perish, because the mind has become, with this unskillful or ayoniso, The yoni is the womb or the matrix or the origin, so you're not really looking in to see the fundamental nature of it, but instead just like skating on the surface. So just skating on the surface, all you notice is the pink color or the nice smell. You don't notice all the aspects of it. If you saw the complete picture of what this rose is, you wouldn't be fueling the arising and the growth of sensual desire. Bhikkhu Sujato is translating Yoniso as irrational. I would tend to think more superficial application of the mind is what can fuel the arising of sensual desire. I'm going to pause a second and see, because most of us are familiar with sensual desire, and you may give, somebody could give one more example of how we may fuel the arising and the increase of sensual desire by doing an unskillful way of seeing or unskillful way of doing. Does anybody know the answer? Can you give an answer? Once there was a long, long time ago, this was before I was a nun, I happened to be, to see somebody, and I noticed their fingernails. And I said, "Oh, what nice fingernails that person has." And just there, it was just, like an example about how the mind could pick up a detail, and the detail could be the basis for a sensual desire, right? Okay. I'll go ahead then if nobody wants to talk. Then what fuels the arising of ill will, or when it has arisen makes it increase and grow? And again, I'm not so sure about Bhante Sujata's translation. He says, there is the feature of harshness. Patika. Patika is, what does Bhikkhu Bodhi say for ill will? Does he say repulsion? Of what is repulsive. So, patika is like something that makes you cringe. Like the screeching of chalk on the chalkboard, or some kind of a loud noise, or it can especially be sometimes more immorality can be very patika. If somebody is, in picking their nose at dinner or something like that, then because that goes against our norms, then you could feel, very like repulsive about that. And again, it's saying the irrational application of the mind are the superficial, the ayoniso, not going down into the deeper meaning of it. Application of mind to that fuels the arising of ill will. When it has arisen, makes it increase and grow. The Buddha gives so many suttas about ways to overcome ill will. And in particular, there's one set I know it's quoted in the Visuddhimagga, and maybe somebody else will remember which sutta it is, where if you're walking along and you see a rag that has been dropped by the side of the road, you could think part of the rag is rotten, but part of it is good. Let me just discard the part that's rotten and keep the part that's good, and I may be able to use it later. And so when somebody is repulsive to us because they're bad, we could think that they have a mixture of qualities, that the part which is bad I can discard, and the part that's good I can keep. Or else, if you're walking along the road and it's extremely hot and you feel so thirsty, and you see where there's a small puddle of water that's been left in the footprint of the ox in the middle of the path, you might be willing to stoop down to the ground and very carefully sip a little bit of water out of that puddle. So even though there's very little goodness there, you can still make use of it. Or else, in that example it says, if you're walking along the road and you see somebody who's very ill, and they don't have any relatives or anybody to help them, and they don't have enough strength to go to the next village to get help. There's no doctor or anything, and even you don't have enough strength or ability to get them to the doctor or to help in time to save their life. And you realize that this person is about to die because they're just too far gone and there's no help to be found. That would be like a person who's completely bad and you can't find any good qualities in them. And then in this metaphor, you wouldn't hate that person. Instead, you would feel so much compassion for them. So even seeing that future of patika, or repulsiveness or harshness, doesn't necessarily mean that ill will has to arise. If there are any comments as we go along, I'll just do the hands up signal and I'll call on you. Then there's a question, what fuels the arising of dullness or drowsiness, or when they have arisen, makes them increase and grow? That's that tina mita is called dullness and drowsiness. There is discontent, sloth, yawning, sleepiness after eating, and mental sluggishness. Frequent irrational application to that fuels the arising of dullness and drowsiness, or when they have arisen, makes them increase and grow. Now this example is a little bit of a mixed bag, isn't it? Even if a person is feeling dullness and drowsiness, they have a mixture of qualities. So if you're sitting in the meditation hall and you're, sort of falling over and falling asleep during the meditation hour, and somebody next to you goes like that, and then you wake up suddenly. See, so you had in you not just the dullness, but you also had that ability to wake. And it can be that well, I don't know really how it is for others. I know it is for myself. When I'm very tired, my control over the mind becomes weak, first of all. And so rather than keeping my awareness focused on the object of meditation, it's very easy for the thoughts to go off into thinking about something else. It's almost like a daydream or a waking dream, or just and it's like our mind is weak, and so it wanders away, and then the next thing you know, it's really fallen asleep and dreaming. So if these qualities are present in you, if you search within yourself and find the different qualities, and by paying attention to the different qualities, or even not believing that it's necessary to give in just because of feeling sleepy. Another feature that I think is interesting in this is what's translated here as discontent. Rati is delight. Arati is not delight, the opposite of delight. And I have very often observed that boredom is frequently connected with aversion. So, like if you don't like the speaker, you'll find whatever they're talking about is boring. And so that boring has an undertone of hostility, and it's a way of sort of like resisting, being not receptive to whatever the situation is. And so this posture of passive resistance to what's going on is very exhausting. And so that's the reason you fall asleep, is because you are sort of resisting something that you don't like, and that wears you down and makes you feel exhausted. So again, this what is called the irrational application of mind, or the superficial application of mind to those experiences of sleepiness, causes the sloth and torpor to grow. Then the next question is, what fuels the arising of restlessness and remorse? Udacha kukucha, when they have risen, and makes them increase and grow. And here again, in the translation, it doesn't seem to reveal very much. It said there is the unsettled mind. Frequent irrational application to that causes the feeling of restlessness and remorse, or causes them to grow. And it's chaitaso, which is translated there as mind. And then the unsettledness is called avupasama. So vupasama means the unification, the calmness, and the tranquility, or the settledness of the mind. it can be that if a person has been very active because they're doing things, so you've had a very lively conversation with somebody, and you are involved in some kind of activity. Let's say earlier on, this family came that was so desperate about getting prayers for their sick relative, and that family was very, very emotional. And so then, after the family has departed, then naturally, out of sympathy, we could feel some like emotional arousal, but to my belief, that's not the same thing as restlessness and remorse. It's rather just that there has been some arousal, and it just takes a few minutes to just allow that excitement to fade away and to drain off. Even when somebody has been activated, then like the adrenaline has gotten into the bloodstream, and it takes a couple of minutes, or even makes 10 or 15 minutes for the adrenaline to stop being a factor and for the mind to come down. But restlessness and remorse as a hindrance is where you don't know how to cause the mind to stop churning. And the mind is continuously churning with some kind of either an emotion or a thought pattern, which is supporting that restlessness. So if somebody is I could give, there's some problem that's come along, and you would be thinking about different possible ways it could be solved, and then you're thinking about, oh, that's not going to work, that's not going to work, that's not going to work, and then you may go on to feel about like the whole system. I'm trying to think of a story on myself instead of embarrassing somebody else by telling a story about their about their unskillful thought patterns. After one of my best friends passed away, they first they were drinking bad water in Florida, so we can blame Florida. And then they were using a water filter that didn't work properly, and so we can blame the manufacturer of the water filter. And then they went to a doctor who didn't realize the urgency of it, and fiddled around for a week before realizing that was making a referral to another doctor. So we can blame that one. And then the other doctor got some tests made and promised to get right back to them. And then that's after we went on vacation. And when the test results came in, the office staff didn't look at the results. And so, like my friend was sitting home actually dying, and the office forgot to look at the results, and then, and then finally, so there's like all these different like ways of blame. And so a person who's just caught up in the emotion, then rather than at a moment of meditation when we've got a chance, to actually have some healing from the stress and sorrow of having a loss like that, instead of allowing that healing to take place, if one is like picking up a story and then churning the mind and churning the mind and churning the mind with that story, and with obsessive thinking about something like that, then that can be fueling this kind of restlessness and remorse. That's just one example. But again, it's this idea of the ayoniso, not looking at the root. So looking at the root is, I think it has two parts. One is in terms of seeing the emptiness or the non-self quality of any situation or any individual or anything, you can see that in samsara, everything is compounded. Every situation has got different parts and elements to it. It's not 100% defined by its essence. So the smell of the rose is not the entirety of the rose. It's just one part of it. And the negligence of any one of those medical people is not really the entirety of the whole situation. So one can change the focus and look more broadly to see it as being a combination of things. And then even frame the view differently to see it in a way which is not so triggering. And then another part of looking to the root is understanding impermanence and seeing that whatever the situation is, it's a moment in something which is continuously changing. And then looking more deeply and seeing the dukkha in it. Now, if we're seeing something pleasant, the dukkha is because it's impermanent and soon it will be gone. If we're seeing something unpleasant, the unpleasantness itself is the dukkha. But whatever aspect of it is dukkha, the important thing is not to turn away, push away, or run away from dukkha, but instead just to acknowledge, yes, that's the way it is. This phenomena has an aspect of dukkha in it because it's part of conditioned reality. And then doing that, seeing those three signs is a way to have yoniso manasikara, to look deeply, to look with wisdom that penetrates to the root of any circumstance or situation. Then there is what fuels the arising of doubt, vicikicca, that's sometimes translated as skeptical doubt. So there's a distinction between having a question and having a doubt. The Buddha encouraged questions. So the disciples, when they needed to know something, to ask questions was definitely allowed and encouraged. But skeptical doubt is a hindrance. It's something that prevents one from being able to understand with wisdom, prevents one from being able to pick up the practices that are suggested in the path and to follow them. Doubt in particular is doubt about the Triple Gem, about the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. So what causes the arising of doubt, when it is arisen, makes it increase and grow? It said there are things that are grounds for doubt. Frequent, irrational, or you could say superficial application of them, mind to them, fuels the arising of doubt, or when it has arisen, makes it increase and grow. So, about the Buddha, one could hear or read, the Buddha was frequently going around with 500 disciples. It must have really worn out the villagers when they had to feed the Buddha and 500 disciples. This was a kind of like an exploitation. How could the Buddha be taking advantage of the people like that by going around with such a gigantic retinue of disciples? The monks were like locusts preying on, taking advantage of the people. So that's one idea. That's a Marxist approach to analysis of religion. And so if you grab that, if you give superficial focus or obsession to that thing which is like it's one small piece of the picture, or which may even not be an accurate way of seeing it in any case, by focusing in an obsessive way on that one part of it, then you can feed the growth of skeptical doubt. Or if you feel, on the other hand, that another aspect of doubt, besides doubting the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, can be doubting whether it's possible for oneself to experience the benefit from practicing this path, because a person might feel they're not good enough to awaken, that they don't deserve the benefits of the spiritual path, that they are destined for hell, bound for hell, and there's no way for them to get out of it. So in a case like that, also, those kinds of thoughts may be based on something. There's some kind of a real thing or a real feeling that caused somebody to think that way. But if they just take those unhelpful, actually unwholesome and harmful thoughts and grasp them without, it's a funny thing. Here's somebody being skeptical about the Dhamma, but actually they're not skeptical about their own negative thoughts. They swallow the hook and bait of their own negative thoughts without questioning those thoughts. So looking more deeply and investigating and find, as I said, it's exactly the same thing. Realizing impermanence, that because of impermanence, then I can change. No matter how bad I am, I can change because of impermanence. That this bad thing I did, or this bad quality, or what mom and dad or somebody used to tell me that I was bad, and that's not all of me. That's just something that happened. It's not the whole picture. It's not my essence, which is forever and unchanging. Just a piece of one of the elements of this flowing of causes and conditions. And so, in that case, one can reframe or rethink or find a different way of looking to go beyond this superficial application of the mind. So this is regarding the factors that cause the increase of the hindrances. What I'd like to do now is go ahead and skip ahead to how to denourish the hindrances. So if you jump ahead a few paragraphs, you can find it. The question is, what starves the arising of sensual desire, or when it has arisen, starves its increase and growth? Can you find it? I'm waiting for those who are in the book to find the page. I think he's got the pages numbered, and if you're going to skip that to the next heading. Okay. What starts the arising of sensual desire? There is the feature of ugliness. This is called the asubha. And typically, there's a classical list of the things which are asubha that are recited in a particular contemplation, which starts head, hairs, body hairs, nails, teeth, skin, and then goes through the different parts of the body in terms of being asubha. We are not encouraging a person to think that the human body is disgusting and to be repelled and disgusted and to have a neurotic hatred towards the body. But instead, that asubha contemplation is more towards actually a realistic approach to the body by breaking it down into its parts. So instead of seeing a person and like having the mind grasp onto the entirety of that person and giving a certain essence and essential meaning of that person, like that person is my hero or that person is my enemy, and thinking that, that every cell in that person is an aspect of my hero or my enemy. But instead, when you break it down, like a head hair, it's just a head hair. And what part of that hair is my enemy, or what part of that hair is my hero? Okay, it could be that if they're really your hero, that you would love to have one of their hairs. And you could put it in their reliquary and worship it. But the Buddha is, encouraging just to say, it's just a hair. It's not something that attracts either pleasure or disgust. But then, when things come up in the wrong context, we think they're disgusting. So, if you notice that if you forgot to change the pillow cover or something for a long time, and you looked at the pillow where you sleep, and you see how the pillow is like greasy and black from the head grease, or if you scratch your head and you can see the greasy skin that gets under your fingernails, or if the cook's hair or somebody's hair gets into the meal, and while you're eating the meal you find a hair in the rice or a piece of hair in the soup, and then so because of like seeing things out of context, it can be seem to be disgusting. And then if one becomes carried away with like an emotion, a story about how disgusting it is, that's where it fuels the arising of ill will. But we're talking about to remove sensual desire. So if I am looking at that same person that was so attractive, if you think about all the different parts of the body, then it can delete the desire for that. Or if you look at a delicious plate of food, which is so attractive about it, you could look at the unattractive qualities. So if you ate too much of that food, you will feel ill. Or if you eat that food after the food is been digested, then it would become part of your muscles, or part of the parts of the body, and so you wouldn't necessarily want to eat your own muscles or drink your own blood, even though the food has become blood or the food has become muscle, and then after that the parts of the food become cast away as urine and feces, and so you don't find those things to be drawing your sensual desire. So in that way, by thinking of the asubha qualities of the food, you can destroy or cut off the arising of sensual desire. Then there's the arising of ill will. What starves the arising of ill will when it has arisen, starves its increase and growth. And now they're not pointing to the sign of beauty. Instead, they're talking about the heart's release by love. Metta ceto vimutti. So metta, loving kindness, our unconditional love, regardless of and whatever the particular qualities and characteristics are, the authentic wish for the welfare of beings without making any distinctions between those who are close or those far away. And then the ceto is referring to the mind, or can refer to the aspect of the mind which is involved with intention. And this ceto vimutti, metta ceto vimutti, is an experience that is to be had through meditation in particular. But then if you've learned how to practice loving kindness in meditation, and you're able to know very clearly what the real benefit of loving kindness is, the type of happiness that is a very safe kind of happiness that can be experienced with the loving kindness meditation. The only drawback of the happiness of loving kindness meditation is that this is a heavenly kind of happiness, and if that's as far as you go and you don't come to the liberating insight, then it could be possible that one would come to a heavenly rebirth and not escape from the cycle of rebirth if this is your only practice, is the practice of loving kindness. So you hope that knowing that even the meditation of loving kindness is conditioned and impermanent, one would go beyond that to non-clinging and to the opening of insight. But nevertheless, as a transitional practice, loving kindness is so precious and so valuable exactly because it has this power, that it has the ability to starve the arising of ill will, starving the increase and growth of ill will. So ill will is one of the most powerful, deepest roots that's keeping us bound in samsara, and even for the possibility of cutting ignorance there, you have to very substantially or completely cut off the root of ill will, cutting off the root of sensual desire. And so this ceto vimutti, metta ceto vimutti, this heart's release by love is absolutely important practice. And if you know how to do it, then when something happens that you don't like, even one who's on the noble path, one who's has stream entry, still has got some ability for aversion. And so if you can spot the arising of aversion very well, because you know yourself, and when it's only the smallest something that, some tightening in the belly or something like that, before you've even started to make up a story about it, you can spot this, this aversive reaction and instantly turn on the kindness. We see this, I see this especially with some of the most skillful Dhamma teachers, bhikkhus and practitioners. Sometimes you have a yogi who comes to your meditation center who's a real badly behaved person, who's quite annoying and irritating. They're maybe they're arrogant, they're full of themselves, they ask stupid questions, and they think they're smarter than others. They bang around, or they fall in love with the teacher, and then they will be using their sharp elbows to get in front of the other yogis because they want to be the one to bring a cup of tea to the teacher. These things really happen in meditation centers. And so what I noticed about the really powerful teachers is that the more obnoxious the student or the yogi is, the more the teacher turns on the kindness. And it has a kind of a magical effect, because somebody who's a jerk usually receives dislike. So somebody who is like that, badly behaved like that, a bad personality, they could often be lonely because they don't get very much love. And they don't get love because of their bad qualities. And so then when this skillful Dhamma teacher is showering them with kindness, then they would quickly fall in love with that teacher and be inspired and feeling like, finally they found one friend in the whole world, and actually become willing to listen. And if that obnoxious person becomes willing to listen, then there's a possibility the skillful means for that person to start to notice and let go of some of their bad qualities. So then even, I guess you could analyze this internally within yourself, that you might have within yourself a part of you which is like a wise meditation teacher, and another part of you which is like a spoiled child. So if the part which is skillful could, every time this spoiled child sticks up, if the part which is the teacher would quickly say, kindness, 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 and just bring kindness to the situation, that would enable that unhappy being within our internal psyche to become calmed down and softer, and not be so angry, not be aversive. Then we come to the factor of dullness and drowsiness. What starves the arising of dullness and drowsiness, or when they have arisen, starves their increase in growth. And it mentions the elements of initiative, persistence, and exertion. Frequent, rational application of mind, or wise reflection on the elements of initiative, persistence, and exertion starves the arising of dullness and drowsiness, or when they have arisen, starves their increase and growth. This is referring to three parts of energy. The aramba is the beginning of energy, when something is static and it's being put into motion. That's the aramba, the stirring it up or starting it. So if you're doing one thing and you need to do something different, it takes an extra push to start it, to develop some momentum. And then there's the persistence, which is called nikkamadhatu, and that's like you have some momentum, and then it takes a special kind of application of energy to keep the momentum going. So you don't want too much and you don't want too little. You want just the amount of energy to keep going. And that energy to keep going and continue also has to be accompanied by wisdom, because you need to be, in a way, like steering it. So you don't use that energy to go into a ditch or to go into a wall, but you use that energy to stay on the road and keep going in the direction that you wish to go in. So that's the persistence. And then the last one, which is called exertion, which is in the Pali, it's parakama dhatu. That's like at the last moment, you've been exerting your proper continuous energy all this time, and you're getting close to the finish line, and then you got to make, to get to the top of the mountain, you got to make one more pull, one more push. Even you thought that you ran out of strength, that you've used up all the energy you had. You can dig deep and find you've got just a little bit more strength to be able to go all the way, to reach the goal. You could say, or else, you're going along in a nice way, and then some tremendous obstacle comes along, that there's a riot or a flood or a fire or a windstorm or something, and then you have to increase the effort to be able to get through all of those troubles that have come along the way. I particularly feel sometimes people might feel they don't have the ability for this kind of energy, and it makes me think of parenthood. That when mom and dad decide to have a baby, they might not actually know how much effort it takes to have a child and take care of a child until that child can become independent. They didn't know that they had that much strength, that much courage, or that much skill to be able to successfully raise a child, and yet somehow or other they find that they do have enough to give to bring that child along. And so moms and dads or parents have been doing this since the beginning of time, finding enough strength to do whatever was necessary to protect and take care of the child. And so if the moms and dads can do that, then we also can do something similar to that, to find enough energy to overcome this dullness and drowsiness. So if you have got a habit of being lazy, that's what causes the dullness and drowsiness to grow. If you have the habit of being energetic, that's what causes dullness and drowsiness not to grow. Another example, in the Sutta on Two Kinds of Thought and several other places, they say if you, in the Ambalata Rahula Sutta, you assess whether what you're doing is, or what you are thinking, planning to do, is it harmful or harmless? And if you realize that what you would like to do is harmless, doesn't hurt me, doesn't hurt the other, doesn't hurt anybody, then it says you can do it. Just go ahead and do it then if it's harmless. And after you've done something that was truly harmless, and you look back and you see, oh, that was truly harmless, then the sutta says you can do that again. You can do it again and again. As long as you see that it's still harmless, you can keep on doing it again and again. So we see this very much in high-quality monastics who have a good training. When they are finished with the morning chanting and before breakfast, they look around and they see something that needs sweeping, and they go and they do the sweeping. Or if they, anything around the temple that they see that needs to be taken care of, they don't hesitate or feel depressed or say, oh, it's so depressing here because things need to be done. Instead, they just get up and go and get up and do those things. And so that kind of habit of bringing up energy to take care of things, you can bring that habit over to the meditation cushion. Remember what it's like, the things that you know how to do, that you easily do them, you easily find the energy for them. Recall what that's like. And then if you're in meditation and in danger of dullness and drowsiness, by reflecting on what energy is like, then you can bring the energy. And then there's restlessness and remorse. What starves the arising of restlessness and remorse, or when they have arisen, starves their increase in growth. And then it says there is the settled mind. That's Chetasa Vupasamo. This may seem a little bit like a redundant idea if you if someone has never had the experience of obtaining concentration on the meditation cushion, if for their entire life they've been distracted, it may be more difficult to call up this settledness of the mind. But if you have sometimes, perhaps on a retreat, or perhaps with the help of a skillful meditation teacher, being with a group of meditators who are sort of supporting that, if you have sometime experienced concentration, experienced that unification and settledness of the mind, then if you can remember that, remember what it was like, remember how you got there. And if you have a chance to go into that settled state of mind again and again, to become practiced in it or rehearsed in it, then later on, having learned it, later on, because of causes and conditions, things could happen that cause the mind to become restless, or that cause you to have remorse, or even causing obsessive thinking about problems or mistakes or something like that can come along. But then if you remember how to meditate, then you've got the tool, you can bring that up to help to denourish this restlessness and remorse. The next one is what starves the arising of doubt, or when it has arisen, starves its increase in growth. There are qualities that are skillful and unskillful, blameworthy and blameless, inferior and superior, those on the side of dark and bright. Frequent rational application of mind to them starves the increase of doubt, or when it has arisen, starves its increase and growth. If I had been covering both the hindrances and the awakening factors, there's something in the next paragraph very similar, which is an aspect of mindfulness, the factor that nourishes mindfulness. So this sutta is giving mindfulness and skeptical doubt in a way as being opposites. It requires courage and honesty to be able to see within ourselves the qualities that could be unskillful or blameworthy, or the qualities that are inferior. But if we can be very objective, studying our own psychology, our own heart, then we could see that, like, thinking like this is bringing me peace and happiness, leading towards wisdom. Thinking like that is just perpetuating my upset, just perpetuating my anger. Like these kind of thoughts are actually poison for me. So why am I continuing to choose to think the thoughts that are poisoning me? And so when you're mindful, you're able to look very clearly and objectively and see those things. And then if you are discovering within yourself the difference between the good and bad, the skillful, unskillful, then you got your own direct knowledge. You don't have to be thinking, well, so-and-so says this and so-and-so says that, and somebody else is saying the other thing, and how can I tell which one is right? You know, they're all, I can find 17 different opinions on the internet, and how I can't tell what's right or what's wrong, because do I look at, which one has got the most hits to say that one must be the right one? But we're depending on something external. We're depending on something that can be directly known inside of ourselves, within our own experience by the practice of mindfulness. And when we know for ourselves, then we don't need to be in doubt. So when encountering a Dhamma teacher or someone who claims to be a Dhamma teacher, one would first do a kind of a preliminary assessment. Is that person seem to be honest? Do they seem to be arrogant, or do they carried away by their own fame, or do they seem to be, kind of realistic? Whether they're somebody who's not famous or someone who's very famous, they're still got a kind of simplicity about them. You say, does the person's behavior in public and private matching up with what they're saying or what they're teaching? And so you've done that preliminary investigation to see, well, okay, I'm willing to trust them in a preliminary way. And then you listen to what they're teaching or what they're suggesting, and you try it out for yourself, following the practices or lessons suggested by that teacher. And then you can evaluate from your own experience, when I try these teachings, is my life getting better or is my life getting worse? And if I'm becoming less peaceful, uh, less wise, uh, less um, uh, uh, worse than if my bad qualities are growing and my good qualities are decreasing while I'm trying to follow this one teacher, then I could say, well, this is probably not the teacher for me, and go find a different teacher. But if you find that teacher who's got those good qualities, and while you're following the suggestions of that teacher, you see my good qualities are growing, my bad qualities are decreasing, I'm becoming more peaceful, my wisdom is growing, then you could say, I can continue following that teacher. I have confidence in that teacher. So it's the same thing with our teacher, uh, the Buddha. We would try to follow the teachings of the Buddha as long as those qualities are developing along the right path. Um, so this is what I have to say about the hindrances, and the other part about the factors of awakening will come next time. And I would very much like to hear Richard's idea about this.
Thank you, Ayya. That last section on what starves the arising of doubt.
Yes.
And he says, what is skillful, unskillful, and he's looking at his own mind. Remember that when the Buddha went to his two teachers, Alara Kalama, the first one, he says, friend Kalama, in what way do you declare that by realizing for yourself with direct knowledge and enter upon abide in this Dhamma? In reply, he declared the base of nothingness. And then the Buddha says, I considered not only Alama Kalama has faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom, I too have faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. Suppose I endeavor to realize that Dhamma that Alama Kalama declares, he enters upon and abides in realizing for himself with direct knowledge. So he's using that same technique of seeing, wait a minute, no, I have all these good qualities. Why should I doubt, right? And he says, and then Buddha says, I soon quickly entered upon and abided in that Dhamma by realizing for myself with direct knowledge. So you can see how Buddha's not just kind of like describing something academically. He's seeing in his own development that this is how he overcame certain things. And it's important to remember that the five hindrances in particular are it needs to be at least temporarily abandoned to enter into jhana. And of course, these high levels of, formless states are highly developed, levels of jhana. So anyways, as you were reading that connection just came up in my mind.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. That's how the Blessed One realized, and he tells us that we can come to our own awakening in the same way. He doesn't want us to just follow because of authority or because of logic, but because of what we can realize through our own experience. This Dhamma is inviting us to come and see, inviting us to experience it for ourselves. And this is the way to overcome skeptical doubt, by at least having enough confidence to look and see. And then once you know for yourself, you don't have to be in doubt anymore. Any other questions from other persons or comments about this teaching? Okay, well, I thank all of you. And we can close by giving respect to the Triple Gem. Araham Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddham Bhagavantang Abhivademi. Svakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami. Supartipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sangham Namami. Thank you, everybody, for your patient listening today.
Ayya.
Thank you very much,
Ayya.